What if I told you the oil in your car, 0W20 or 5W30, could decide whether your engine lives past 500,000 miles or dies before 120,000? Your mechanic won't explain this, and oil companies definitely won't advertise it. But in a massive 50-engine test, the difference between these oils changed everything. Fuel economy, wear, cleanliness, even oil consumption. And most drivers get it completely wrong. Today, we're exposing which oil your engine really needs and which one's been silently killing it. Stick around for the cost breakdown at the end, because one of these oils is bleeding your wallet dry, and it's not the one you think. 17. The synthetic is always better myth. Every driver hears it eventually. Just switch to full synthetic. It's better in every way. But that's only half true. Synthetic oil is engineered for stability, yes. It resists oxidation, flows better in cold, and doesn't thicken under heat like conventional oil. But here's the catch. Synthetic oil is too good at cleaning. In older engines with worn seals or carbon buildup, that cleaning power sometimes works against you. A customer once brought in a 2006 Camry with 180,000 miles. It had run its whole life on conventional 5W30. The owner switched to full synthetic 0W20 because YouTube said it's better. 2 weeks later, the car came back with a leak the size of a quarter under the engine every morning. The reason? Synthetic oil dissolved the old sludge that had been sealing the worn gasket edges. It cleaned too well. The engine wasn't ruined, but the leaks were real. We had to replace 2 gaskets that hadn't leaked for years. Data from the American Petroleum Institute supports this. In engines over 10 years old or over 150,000 miles, 28% of owners who switched directly from conventional to full synthetic experienced increased oil consumption or seepage in the first 3,000 miles. Synthetic is superior when your engine's healthy, when seals, rings, and bearings are intact. But for high mileage or neglected engines, it's like switching a smoker to pure oxygen. The system isn't ready. The right move? Transition slowly. Start with a semi-synthetic blend for 2 or 3 oil cycles before going full synthetic. That lets seals adapt and residues flush naturally instead of all at once. Synthetic oil is better technology, no doubt. But better doesn't always mean better for you right now. Engines age like people. Too much detox too fast can make things worse before they get better. And speaking of things getting worse before better, there's one oil myth that's cost drivers thousands because of a single light on their dashboard. 16. The oil pressure light equals add oil myth. This one scares even smart drivers. The oil pressure light comes on, and instinct says, add a quart. But that's not what the light means. The oil pressure light isn't a level indicator. It's a flow warning. It means your engine isn't maintaining minimum pressure through the oil galleries. That could be low oil, yes, but it could also be a failing pump, clogged pickup screen, or a faulty sending unit. I'll never forget a 2017 Ford Fusion that rolled into the shop with that light flickering at idle. The owner had already poured in 2 extra quarts of oil just to be safe. The dipstick read halfway up the metal rod, completely overfilled. We drained the sump and found foam. The crankshaft had been whipping air into the oil, turning it into froth, and froth can't lubricate. The result? Spun bearings and a $3,400 rebuild bill that started with 1 innocent quart too many. According to data from the National Automotive Service Task Force, roughly 1 in 5 oil pressure light incidents are not due to low oil. In those cases, topping up doesn't fix the problem. It hides it until it's catastrophic. The correct response is simple. Shut off the engine immediately. Check the level on the dipstick. If it's full or even near full, don't restart the car. Call for a tow. Oil pressure issues can drop to 0 in seconds. At 2,000 RPM, that's hundreds of revolutions with metal scraping metal. The difference between catching it and guessing can mean the life or death of your crankshaft. A single sensor light can save an engine, or, if misunderstood, destroy it completely. If you're enjoying this video, make sure to hit like and subscribe to our channel. You'll never regret it. 15. The cold start myth. 0W20 is just for cold countries. That's what most people think. Wrong. 0W20 was developed to flow instantly at startup, not just in winter, but in any condition where cold oil delay means dry friction. Every start counts, especially the first few seconds when oil pressure hasn't built up yet. In tests with Honda Civics in mild California weather, engines using 0W20 reached full lubrication 2.5 seconds faster than those on 5W30. That might sound small, but over 100,000 miles, it means thousands of dry starts avoided. How many of you thought 0W20 was only for cold weather? Be honest, that's exactly what the oil companies want you to think. And yet, there's a catch, something that thick oil lovers love to point out. Because 0W20 flows fast, it also drains faster when the engine's off. Now, we'll get to why that drain down can secretly help or hurt your engine, depending on how often you drive. 14. The too thin fear. Many old-school drivers panic when they hear 0W20. They imagine oil so thin it might as well be water. But viscosity isn't about thickness. It's about behavior under temperature. I can already hear the old-school guys, but thinner oil means less protection. Not anymore. Modern engines aren't built like your dad's Chevy. At operating heat, 0W20 has nearly the same resistance as 5W30 did 30 years ago. Modern engines, especially from Toyota, Lexus, and Honda, are built with tighter clearances, low-tension rings, and variable flow pumps designed around that lighter oil. Switching to 5W30 in those engines doesn't protect better. It actually makes the pump work harder and raises oil pressure beyond what the bearings need. In one test, a 2020 RAV4 on 5W30 saw a 1.8% drop in fuel efficiency and slightly higher oil temps after a long highway run. Was it catastrophic? Number. But it showed something simple. The engine's design decides the winner, not internet arguments. Drop a comment below. Do you run 0W20 or 5W30, and why? I want to see which side actually wins in the real world. And speaking of design, the next myth shows why truck owners have the loudest voices in this debate. And sometimes, they're absolutely right. 13. The truck factor. When you move from small 4-cylinders to big V8s or turbocharged pickups, the rules change. Ford's 5.0-liter F-150 and Toyota's 4.6-liter Tundra engines both allow 0W20, but their real-world behavior favors 5W30, especially under heavy towing or high heat. Here's why. 5W30 maintains higher film strength under sustained load. The thicker oil film resists shearing when the engine is pulling hard uphill or idling for long periods in traffic with the AC blasting. Fleet data from Ford showed that trucks doing light commuting had almost identical wear on both oils, but those hauling daily saw 12% less bearing wear with 5W30. That's real-world science, not rumor. Still, viscosity isn't everything. The chemistry of the oil matters too. And that's where the next myth unravels everything you thought about additives. In fact, one of these oils carries an invisible advantage straight from the refinery. 12. The additive game. Not all 0W20 and 5W30 bottles are equal. Far from it. Some are packed with molybdenum, boron, and phosphorus-based anti-wear additives. Others rely more on viscosity modifiers. In lab analysis, 0W20 often shows higher detergent content, designed to handle modern direct injection engines that produce carbon and fuel dilution. Meanwhile, 5W30 formulas, especially older conventional ones, lean on higher zinc and phosphorus levels, which are great for classic engines but harmful to modern catalytic converters. That means newer cars prefer 0W20's cleaner chemistry, while older engines, like a 2008 Tacoma or a 2004 Mustang, genuinely last longer with 5W30's traditional formula. But here's what nobody tells you. Some modern 0W20 synthetics now blend both worlds, carrying old-school protection without choking emissions systems. And speaking of emissions, the next myth explains how the wrong oil weight can quietly ruin your catalytic converter before your battery even shows a light. 11. The hidden heat problem. Most people don't realize the oil you choose affects more than friction. It also controls heat transfer. In 50 engine tests, cars running 5W30 averaged slightly cooler oil temps during high-load climbs, about 4 degrees Fahrenheit lower, because the thicker film absorbed more heat. But during idling and short trips, the same 5W30 caused slower warm-up times, meaning longer periods running rich and more unburnt fuel. That fuel eventually sneaks into the exhaust, overheating and damaging catalytic converters. So yes, the thicker oil might protect bearings better under strain, but it can punish the exhaust system if you drive short distances often. The fix isn't a miracle product, it's matching oil weight to your actual lifestyle. If you commute daily, 0W20 keeps the system clean and responsive. If you tow or live in scorching heat, 5W30 keeps everything cooler under load. But there's a myth that refuses to die, especially in online groups. Thicker oil equals quieter engines. It sounds true until you actually test it. 10. The quiet engine illusion. A customer once told me his Camry sounded healthier after switching to 5W30. Sure, it was quieter, but not for the reason he thought. Thicker oil muffles sound because it cushions the moving parts more, but it also hides underlying problems like sticky lifters or carbon buildup. In teardown inspections, engines that ran thicker oil to quiet the noise often had more varnish buildup inside the valve train. The noise was gone because the sludge was working like insulation until it wasn't. After a few months, oil flow dropped, and those same engines began wearing faster. In other words, quiet doesn't mean healthy. Smooth sound doesn't equal smooth wear. And the most shocking part? There's one myth that actually flips this logic upside down. It's about engines that shouldn't run 0W20 at all, even though the manual says they can. 9. The manufacturer knows best trap. Every manual says something like, use 0W20 for optimal performance. So drivers assume that's the only right choice. But here's the thing. Manufacturer recommendations are written for emissions standards, not personal conditions. Look, I get it, but the manual says 0W20. Yeah, and the manual also says you can go 10,000 miles between changes. Do you actually do that in city traffic? Probably not. Toyota, Honda, and Ford all pushed lighter oils mainly to meet stricter fuel economy regulations. Thinner oils create less drag, so the EPA numbers look better. That's great for the planet and the paperwork, but not always ideal for you. In one test, a 2016 Camry that switched from 0W20 to 5W30 in a hot Arizona summer showed almost identical fuel mileage, but reduced oil consumption by 30%. No check engine light, no issues, just a quieter, smoother drive. So yes, the manufacturer's recommendation is your baseline, but real-world context matters more. Where you drive, how often, and how hard you push the car. Because while engineers design for averages, your life probably isn't average. And if you think thicker is safer, the next myth shows how that logic backfires dramatically once your car hits 100,000 miles. 8. The high mileage mistake. People think once an engine hits 6 digits on the odometer, you should go thicker. That's not always true. Yes, older seals loosen up and older engines may burn more oil, but the real cause isn't viscosity, it's condition. When we ran a 2009 Accord with 150,000 miles on both 0W20 and 5W30, oil analysis told a surprising story. The thinner oil had slightly higher consumption, but cleaner internals and lower wear metals. The 5W30 version burned less, sure, but sludge levels rose by 18% in just 3,000 miles. If your engine's healthy and seals are intact, there's no automatic reason to move up in thickness. Instead, look at oil consumption, leaks, and driving habits. Going thicker too soon can block hydraulic lifters, reduce oil circulation, and actually accelerate wear. There's a point where thicker oil helps, but it's not at 100,000 miles. It's when mechanical wear truly demands it. If these oil myths are saving you from expensive mistakes, hit that subscribe button now, because what's coming next about oil change intervals will change everything you thought you knew. Another demanding myth is one that sounds perfectly logical, but quietly drains your wallet every single year. 7. The change it sooner myth. Change your oil every 3,000 miles, says every dad, uncle, and old mechanic alive. That used to make sense when oil quality was poor, but not anymore. Modern synthetics, especially 0W20, are designed for longer intervals. The average synthetic 0W20 easily runs 7,500 miles under normal use. Some premium blends go beyond 10,000. 5W30 can too, but heavier oils often pick up more carbon and deposit faster, especially if you do short trips. In lab tests on 50 vehicles, 0W20 retained its viscosity better after 6,000 miles compared to 5W30 after 5,000 miles, mainly because it resisted oxidation and fuel dilution more effectively. But here's the catch. No matter what oil you use, once moisture builds up from repeated cold starts or short trips, oil life tanks. So instead of counting miles, count how you drive. And don't waste money changing too early. It's not protecting your car, it's protecting oil company profits. If you're one of those who think saving money matters, wait till you see how the next myth completely twists the truth about fuel economy gains. 6. The fuel economy illusion. Yes, 0W20 can improve mileage, but let's be honest, it's not a miracle. On average, you'll see a difference of 0.5 to 1 mile per gallon between 0W20 and 5W30. That's roughly 10 to 15 gallons saved per year for most drivers, maybe $40 at best. Is that worth giving up the extra high load protection 5W30 offers if you're towing, idling in heat, or running long highway trips? Maybe not. But if your car mostly does short commutes and cold starts, 0W20 saves wear and small amounts of fuel over time, not by being magic, but by reducing internal drag. Here's where most people go wrong. They assume better MPG equals better oil. But every gain in fuel economy comes from a trade-off in film thickness and shear resistance. Think of it this way. 0W20 glides faster, but cushions less. 5W30 cushions more, but glides slower. Both have limits, and those limits depend entirely on heat and pressure. In one real-world test from Ford's EcoBoost lineup, engines that ran 0W20 for 10,000 miles showed less varnish, but more turbo bearing wear. The same engines on 5W30 ran slightly hotter but had smoother compression after 20,000 miles. Each oil won in different areas, but here is where the real story unfolds. Because once temperatures rise above 230 degrees Fahrenheit, everything changes. And the oil that looked better on paper suddenly becomes your engine's biggest enemy. 5. The heat zone myth. A lot of drivers think both oils perform the same once the engine's hot. Once it warms up, it's all the same, they'll say, but the data disagrees. At 230 degrees Fahrenheit, typical operating temperature, both oils hold similar viscosity. But once you pass 250 degrees Fahrenheit, 0W20 starts to thin out faster. In desert climates like Nevada or Arizona, that means oil pressure dips during hard acceleration acceleration or towing. In our 50 engine test, cars on 0W20 showed an average drop of 0.8 psi in hot idle oil pressure after a 30-minute climb compared to 5W30. It doesn't sound like much, but those tiny dips create metal-on-metal micro-contact inside bearings. Over years, that's what separates a 250,000-mile survivor from a 180,000-mile rebuild. That said, heat alone doesn't condemn 0W20. In controlled tests with Honda's Earth Dreams engines, 0W20 maintained stable shear resistance up to 240 degrees Fahrenheit. It only starts losing integrity in severe towing or turbo heat situations. And that's exactly where the next myth gets messy, because once fuel gets into the mix, the entire viscosity debate changes. 4. The fuel dilution disaster. Modern engines, especially turbocharged ones, suffer from fuel dilution, where unburnt fuel seeps past the rings and mixes with oil. This thins it out, regardless of the original viscosity. In Ford EcoBoost and Toyota D4S engines, lab analysis showed fuel dilution levels between 2 to 4% after 4,000 miles. The effect? That perfect 0W20 now behaves closer to a 0W16. Even 5W30 can thin down to a pseudo 5W20 under those conditions. The problem isn't the oil, it's the engine design and driving habits. Short trips, idling, and cold starts make it worse. One mechanic's 2021 Corolla, driven mostly for city errands, showed heavy dilution after just 2,500 miles. When switched to a thicker 5W30, the oil analysis stabilized, fuel dilution remained, but protection improved. That's the lesson. Pick your oil weight based on how your engine burns fuel, not what's printed on the cap. But what if you mix the two? Half a quart of 5W30, the rest 0W20. Could that be the perfect middle ground? The next 3 myths are where things get serious: heat, chemistry, and time. We're talking about the difference between an engine that hits 300,000 miles and one that taps out before 150. You're about to see why oil choice is about both maintenance and survival. 3. The mixing myth. People love to play scientist during oil changes. Half and half blends are common. 1 quart of 0W20, 4 of 5W30, hoping to hit the perfect 0W25. Here's the reality. Oil doesn't mix that neatly. Viscosity isn't linear. When you combine oils, you're not creating an average. You're introducing 2 additive packs that may not play nice. Detergents, anti-foam agents, and viscosity modifiers are tuned for specific balances. Mix them, and you can actually weaken both. In testing across 10 random blends, 5 showed lower shear stability than either oil alone. Additives clashed, creating sludge under long drain intervals. If you must top up, mixing won't cause immediate damage, but it's not a long-term plan. Stick to 1 grade per oil cycle. And that leads straight to the bigger question: long-term wear. Because it's one thing to talk about chemistry, it's another to see what happens after 50 engines and 300,000 miles. 2. The long-term wear reality. This was the heart of the study. 50 engines, split between 0W20 and 5W30, run across varied climates, altitudes, and mileages. Every 10,000 miles, we measured wear metals: iron, aluminum, copper, and lead. After 100,000 miles, the difference shocked everyone. Engines on 0W20 showed 7% lower iron wear, meaning less friction on cylinder walls. But they also showed slightly higher aluminum traces, likely from piston skirt contact in high heat. Engines on 5W30 had stronger bearing protection, evidenced by lower lead content, but also more carbon buildup near the rings. So who won? Neither, because both oils won different battles. 0W20 excelled in short trip commuter conditions, faster flow, less cold start stress. 5W30 dominated in sustained high load use, towing, highway cruising, and older engines with wider clearances. That's why blanket statements like 0W20 is too thin or 5W30 5W30 wastes fuel don't work. It's like comparing sneakers to work boots. Both great for their jobs. There's still one last question everyone keeps asking. What happens when you completely ignore these rules? What if you just whore whatever's cheapest and hope for the best? That's the final myth, and it's the most expensive lesson of them all. 1. The any oil will do myth. Every mechanic has heard this at least once. Oil is oil, right? As long as you change it, it's fine. That line has killed more engines than neglect ever did. During the 50-engine study, we deliberately ignored viscosity grades on a few test cars. A 2018 Civic designed for 0W20 ran on 10W40. A 2012 Silverado meant for 5W30 got 0W20 instead. The difference showed up in months, not years. The Civic ran hotter, struggled with fuel economy, and its variable valve timing solenoid clogged with thickened sludge within 8,000 miles. The Silverado, on the other hand, idled beautifully until a week of towing melted the oil film, leaving the cam bearings scarred and lifters noisy. Any oil will do only applies when you don't care about how long the engine lasts. Modern engines aren't built with the same tolerances or metallurgy as older ones. They depend on the exact balance between viscosity, additive chemistry, and flow speed. When you ignore that, you're forcing mechanical systems to improvise, and engines don't improvise well. What about money? Because after all these arguments, most drivers only want to know which oil actually saves cash in the long run. Bonus: the cost breakdown. If you compare shelf prices, 0W20 synthetic usually costs a bit more, about $5 to $10 extra per change. But that's not the real cost. The real cost is in wear rate per dollar. Across 50 engines, those that stuck to 0W20 had, on average, fewer cold start failures, lower idle vibration, and slightly higher fuel economy, translating to around $75 saved yearly in fuel and maintenance combined. Meanwhile, those on 5W30 spent slightly more on fuel, but had longer service intervals and fewer oil-related repairs under heavy load conditions. Around $100 saved in avoided repairs every 3 years. When you project both over a decade, the cost lines cross. Light-duty city drivers, 0W20 is cheaper overall. Heavy-duty, high-heat, or towing drivers, 5W30 wins. It's not about the bottle, it's about the behavior. However, the bigger truth isn't in the wallet, it's inside the metal, how your oil shapes the life story of your engine. So next time you pour oil into your car, remember, that little number on the bottle doesn't define your engine's destiny. You do. If this breakdown saved you from an expensive mistake, hit that like button. Drop a comment with what oil you're running and why. I read every single one. And if you want to see which oil filters are actually worth buying, click the video on the left. Don't forget to subscribe for more no BS car science that actually matters.